Thank you for joining us today. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes as we're letting people in here. Thank you for joining us today. I see someone raise their hand. If they have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. Also, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Thank you, Erica. Good to see your name. We're just going to give it a minute because it takes a while for the folks to come in. And I still see we still have a steady stream. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat. It's good to see you all. The top of the hour has slipped a little bit here because we have so many people joining us. We want to make sure the critical mass gets on before we begin. Technology can't keep up with us. All right, well, we have a lot to cover today, so we will go ahead and get started. And those folks who come in will join as they're able. So next slide, please, Melissa. Hopefully you all reviewed that, actually. Let me go back to that, Melissa, since we have people coming in. As we said, please put your name in the chat, add your affiliation and your role if you're able. We're going to take questions at the end because we have a lot of excellent presenters today. So we want to make sure everyone shares their expertise with you, but feel free to put your questions in the chat as you think of them, because if you're like me, you forget them. As you're comfortable, especially during the Q&A section, to turn on your video, feel free to do that. Next slide, please, Melissa. So we're thrilled. I saw the registration list, and we're thrilled to have many of you from the aging world join us today, from area agencies on aging, from state units on aging and the like, and Title VI programs, Native American programs. But we also have a lot of kinship navigators who are joining us today, a lot of other kinship folks from systems that impact kinship and grand families, and we're thrilled to have you join us today too, so that you can learn from these area agencies on aging and the programs that they are offering, so that you can partner with them and reach out to your own area agency on aging or Title VI program in your community and partner with them to maximize your resources and reach more kinship or grand families. Which brings me to that terminology. Here at the network, we use the terms kinship and grand families interchangeably to mean grandparents, other relatives, close family friends who raise children when parents cannot. So again, thank you for joining us. I'm just going to lay a little bit of background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Leland King, our partner at US Aging. But we are the first ever National Technical Assistance Center on grand families and kinship families. And by on, we mean that we don't serve the families directly. We leave that to you all who know your communities and your families best. But what our role is to work with all the systems around the country that impact the families and try to elevate best practices, promising practices, things that you can replicate in your community, like the programs you're going to hear about today. Next slide, please. So we do a number of things. I want to elevate a couple, which is our brand new website, which has a lot of resources on it, and it will house this webinar recording, the slide deck, and related materials within the next few days. We also take individual requests for technical assistance. So if you are a kinship navigator or an area agency on aging somewhere and want to have a specific question about what somebody else is doing or what you may or may not do, or something that we can help with, please reach out, complete that form there on that link. And I said you will get all these slides within the next couple of days. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. I promise this won't last more than 5 minutes, but I want to let you all know that, especially for those who are new to this population, that kinship grandfamilies have many strengths. The children in these families, the research for decades has shown how they thrive as compared to children placed with non-relatives. They have better behavioral health, better mental health outcomes, and a lot of things that are just kind of obvious, like better connection to culture, community, siblings, and they're just as likely to achieve, or they're likely to achieve, I should say, permanency. Many of these families do adopt the children in their care eventually or obtain guardianship. So these are very stable long-term families in many instances, and the children do very well with these caregivers. Next slide, please. But they do face unique challenges. And these really are the core challenges that kind of impact everything, which is that many of these caregivers are older, as you'll hear from Leland. They're raising children at a time they didn't expect or plan to. And even if they're younger, they're raising them at a time perhaps that they didn't expect or plan to. So that is different than being a parent, where you have planning time, where you expect to raise the children, where you're, thinking about it. They often get the children in a moment's notice. Something bad has happened to the parents, and that's why they've had to step up. So perhaps they were killed in a car accident. Perhaps they are substance users, and it's gotten to the point where they can't parent. So some type of traumatic situation has caused those parents to be unable to parent, which of course impacts the entire family, including the children. And then lastly, there's no automatic legal relationship to the children like parents have. So without legal custody, without guardianship, without adopting these kids, access to services and supports can be very challenging. So keeping that in mind and how they plan for the children in the event of their death or disability is really important when we provide services to the families. And I know it's at top of mind of the area agencies on aging and the Title VI programs. So these two programs, which some of you may not have heard of before, have been around for over 20 years. They are very successful programs that are part of the Older Americans Act. Because they are part of the Older Americans Act, they are constrained to caregivers who are ages 55 and older. That said, many of the area agencies on aging, I'm sure you're going to hear from a couple examples today, are able to serve younger caregivers using other pots of funding. So, it's not necessarily that they can't reach or don't reach the younger caregivers as well. Both programs provide an array of supportive services, or can provide an array of supportive services to the families. In 2020, so when this law was enacted, it had a 10% cap. So the law was designed to serve family caregivers like me caring for an older parent, say. But we said, people my age are often, people the older age are often receiving care, but they're also often giving care. So it also, from the very beginning, has included grandparents and other relatives raising children. But it was limited to the money could only 10% of that funding, that federal funding, could be used for grandfamilies or kinship families. That cap was lifted 2 years ago. So that no longer exists. So you can be responsive to your community and the needs within your community with this funding. These on this slide are the 5 categories of supportive services that this program can fund, that these programs can fund and support. And that last category, supplemental services, is a catch-all that we've seen a lot of creativity with, including legal assistance, direct cash assistance, a real array of supports and services. So know, especially for those of you who aren't in the aging world, that this funding is available and that the aging system is a system that you can partner with. So go and find your area agency on aging, your Title VI program, and ask them how you can work together. And you'll be given a lot of the tools and a lot of ideas today of what you can approach them with and how you may partner. That is our goal for today. So it is my pleasure to let you know that we have an array of excellent speakers today. Leland King, who is our very valued partner at US Aging. He is one of the national partners on this Technical Assistance Center. Teresa Jorgensen, who's the Caregiver Support Services Manager at the Southeast Tennessee Area Agency on Aging and Disability. Marcia Rose is with us. She's a Kinship Navigator Program Supervisor at the Area Office on Aging of Northwestern Ohio. Arcelia Armstrong, who's the coordinator of the Caregiver Support Program and Kinship Navigator Program in the Area Office of Aging of Northwestern Ohio. And then finally, Pam Plimpton, who's the Intergenerational Coordinator at the County of San Diego in California, their Health and Human Services Agency, Aging and Independent Services. So an array of speakers from all around the country, and it is my pleasure now to turn it over to Leland King. Leland?
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. And could we go back to the last slide, please? So my name is Leland King, and as Anna mentioned, I'm from US Aging. I manage US Aging's role in the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network and National Technical Assistance Center, which, as Anna mentioned, is funded by the US Administration for Community Living and led by Generations United. As Anna mentioned, the network, I will be using the terms kinship family and grandfamily interchangeably. And I also use the term grandfamily caregivers to describe the grandparents, other relatives, and close family friends raising grandfamily children. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I need to advance my slides. Okay. So as part of our role with the Grandfamilies and Kinship Support Network, US Aging conducted a poll of area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American aging programs to learn more about how these vital organizations support kinship families, their challenges in doing so, their funding and budgets, and their technical assistance interests. The poll results were compiled into a new report and fact sheet. The fact sheet now is available on the network's website, and the report will be released soon. I encourage you to add your email addresses to the network's website so you can be notified of new resources like these as they become available. Next slide, please. Before I discuss results of the poll, I would like to present some of the reasons why grandfamilies are of importance to the aging network. First, about 2.4 million grandparents nationwide are raising their grandchildren, along with over 1 million other relatives raising relative children or children of close family friends, and their numbers are on the rise. Second, grandparents raising grandchildren are more likely than the general population to be low income. This coincides with the Older Americans Act aim to target supportive services to older adults with the greatest economic and social need. Grandfamily caregivers also are more likely to have disabilities, and many of the children in their care additionally have disabilities. Finally, 1/4 of grandparent-headed households frequently worry about being able to put food on the table for themselves and for the children they are raising. Next slide, please. Recognizing this need, as Anna mentioned, the federal government makes funding available to area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American aging programs to support grandfamily caregivers ages 55 and older. This funding is made available through the Older Americans Act, Title IIIe National Family Caregiver Support Program, and through Title VI-C, the Native American Caregiver Support Program. As you can see in the slide, 2/3 of grandparents raising grandchildren are ages 55 or older. Grandfamily caregivers further report feelings of satisfaction, pride, and meaning in raising their relative children, suggesting they have much to share with others about resiliency. Returning to US Aging's poll, the poll was open from April 27th to June 1st of 2022 and sent to the directors of 615 area agencies on aging and 250 Title VI Native American aging programs. Our response rate was 25%. While this is a strong response rate for a topical poll, a response rate of 60% is necessary for the data to be considered nationally representative. Next slide, please. One of the core purposes of the poll was to gather information on how many area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American aging programs offer services targeted specifically for grandfamilies. 67% of the poll's respondents indicated they offer such services. We also found that 8% of respondents help grandfamily caregivers through their broader services for older adults, but do not offer any services specifically targeting this population. Next slide, please. Of those area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American aging programs, which do offer services specifically designed for grandfamilies, we learned that they provide many of the services which Generations United in their 2021 State of Grandfamilies report identified as most needed. 87% of respondents, for example, informed grandfamily caregivers about available services in their communities. Another 77% helped grandfamily caregivers access those services. Other assistance which Generations United identified as key for grandfamilies and which AAA's and Title VI programs offer include caregiver education and training, support groups, respite care, and legal aid. Next slide, please. Another thing we hope to learn from the poll was how many grandfamily caregivers the Aging Network reaches. We learned that 3/4 of respondents serve 50 or fewer grandfamily caregivers. 7% serve between 51 and 100, and just under 20% serve 100 or more. 2 area agency on aging respondents reported serving over 1,000 grandfamily caregivers each. Next slide, please. As you may recall, the Older Americans Act National Family Caregiver Support Program and its Native American Caregiver Support Program provide funds for the support of grandfamily caregivers ages 55 and older. 1/3 of grandparents raising grandchildren, however, are younger than age 55. Still, we learned that 38% of AAA and Title VI program respondents are able to support these younger grandfamily caregivers. Next slide, please. One way area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American aging programs do so is by leveraging other funding sources. We learned that in their last budget year, more than half of poll respondents tapped other funds. As you can see, 22% of respondents utilize other Older Americans Act funding, 34% use state or local funds, 10% fundraised, and 5% use tribal general revenue. You'll also notice that 13% of respondents specified using other funds. These other funds include time-limited funding from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, state lottery money, and other federal funding. Next slide, please. Many area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American aging programs also expand their reach through partnerships. We ask respondents to identify providers to whom they make referrals or from whom they receive referrals. Respondents identified over 24 referral partners. The top 10 are shown here. These include legal assistance providers, child welfare agencies, and schools and preschools, each of which were identified by over half of respondents. Disability services, mental health, nutrition, and after-school and camp providers, which were selected by over 40% of respondents, and income assistance, housing, and kinship navigator providers named by about 1/3 of respondents. Next slide, please. Up until 2020, as Anna mentioned, states could not use more than 10% of their National Family Caregiver Support Program funds on grandfamily caregivers. Many states passed this requirement on to area agencies on aging. With the 2020 Older Americans Act reauthorization, however, this restriction was lifted. We asked area agencies on aging if they have increased their use of National Family Caregiver Support Program funds on this population or plan to do so. The majority of respondents indicated that they have already increased their National Family Caregiver Support Program spending or plan to increase it. Next slide, please. We also asked both area agencies on aging and Title VI Native American programs to identify their top 3 challenges in supporting grandfamily caregivers. Over half of respondents specified outreach as an obstacle. 27% also reported difficulty reaching grandfamily caregivers under the age of 55, and 32% declared challenges in knowing with whom to partner to reach families. A little less than half of respondents identified limited funding as a hurdle. Taken together, these responses suggest a desire by respondents to serve more grandfamilies. Next slide, please. When asked about their training interests, about a third of respondents identified grandfamily mental health issues and effective outreach as among the topics that interest them most. Respondents could select up to 3 interests and identified around 10. Their top 5 interests are listed here. Interestingly, you may recall that about 75% of poll respondents indicated they serve 50 or fewer grandfamily caregivers. When only these respondent interests are considered, their top interest is effective outreach. Next slide, please. In summary, most poll respondents report supporting grandfamily caregivers. Most are 50 or fewer caregivers, and many want to increase their level of support, but they need more training and resources to do so. Next slide, please. We will now hear from representatives of 3 area agencies on aging whose grandfamily programs are highlighted in our report. The report in total highlights the work of 5 area agencies on aging. Unfortunately, while we reached out to a couple of Title VI programs to learn more about their innovative programs for potential inclusion as case examples in the report, we did not hear back. We know Title VI programs operate in general with little funding and few staff. We will be doing more outreach to highlight their work in future opportunities. I will now turn it over to Teresa Jorgensen, Caregiver Support Services Manager with the Southeast Tennessee Area Agency on Aging and Disability. Teresa, I think you're on mute.
I am. Thank you, Leland. So I'm excited to be here to share the program that we provide through our National Family Caregiver Support Program. It is titled Respite Tutoring Services. As many of you are aware, and as Anna was saying earlier, more and more children are not able to be raised by their birth parents. And fortunately, more and more relative caregivers are actually stepping up to the plate and taking these children in and providing the care to them. Becoming a caregiver of a minor child is difficult enough for an older adult relative. Many grandparents and other adult relative caregivers who thought their days of daily parenting were done have willingly stepped up to raise another generation of their family. This means taking on added responsibility for day-to-day maintenance of a home, schedules, meals, helping the children with homework, studying for tests. And in turn, this often results in caregivers giving up their leisure time and many other aspects of their independence. And then add to that, the subject matter being taught today in schools can definitely be mind-boggling. There's new ways of teaching English, social studies, science, and math. I don't know about you guys. I know when my son hit about 4th or 5th grade, bringing home some of his math homework, I was no longer able to help him with it. And I can't imagine being a grandparent or a great-grandparent, and it's been 30 years or 40, since I've been part of the education, dealing with education. So add that struggle to their day-to-day living. So something that we noticed, in addition to our Family Caregiver Support Program, we have the Relative Caregiver Program housed under our agency, and I'm fortunate to be able to manage it. And that's for a program that is funded through the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. And it is a program that assists relative caregivers raising non-birth children and provides many different services. And what we kept hearing, our family advocates coming and telling us that these families are struggling, trying to help these children with homework. We knew that this was a necessity. We just didn't know how to address the need. And then this thing called COVID hit. And the schools were shut down, children were sent home, virtual classes were put into place, forcing parents and guardians to become teachers overnight. This added to the stress already felt by relative caregivers who were struggling with technology barriers, helping with unfamiliar subjects, and taking away the little bit of respite in-school classes provided. And even when schools started to reopen, many of the caregivers that had their own underlying health issues had to take necessary measures to reduce their risk of exposure to COVID and opted to keep the children home even longer once school resumed. At about that time, we were presented with some CARES Act funding and were asked to submit an overall plan on how we plan to spend those dollars. So we brainstormed, and in June of 2020, the idea was born that ensuring children were given the best opportunity for academic achievement would also serve as respite for older adult relative caregivers. As part of the Family Caregiver Support Program, any services that we offer have to be designed as respite for that caregiver, and we've often struggled, how can we do that? So this was a perfect opportunity for us to provide that respite service and address that need of the educational difficulties that they're faced with day to day. So the innovative strategy to provide tutoring as respite for older adult relative caregivers of minors was developed, and we submitted it for approval to the State Unit on Aging, which is the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability, as part of our overall plan for CARES Act funding. Because of the tremendous success, once those funds were gone, we made the decision to make it a permanent service under the Older Americans Act National Family Caregiver Support Program 3E funding. So how did we get started? Once we determined this is something we wanted to offer, we reached out to several tutoring providers in our area and decided who could we develop a partnership with. There were certain things that we had to put in place because of the way our funding works, and we have to do invoicing. It had to be a provider that was willing to work with us, that would be in agreement to invoice us after the services have been delivered. So that can be difficult for some of these agencies, but we were very fortunate to find a provider that was willing to do that with us. And so we created a partnership with them. We have a contract with them. And so they're able to provide our services for us. And then we're like, how are we going to get the word out about this? So of course we had to do a lot of networking and a lot of outreach, and we reached out to a lot of our local nonprofits, our after-school care providers, our Department of Education, our courts, the Department of Children's Services, the Department of Human Services, and United Ways. And we just, any way we were able to get the information out there, we were, stepped up to do that. So how does it work? Once we have a referral come in, we identify to make sure that they're eligible. And as you can see, there's the eligibility criteria there. The caregiver has to be 55 or older. The child has to be under the age of 18, and they have to be enrolled in school. So they have to be in grades kindergarten through 12. The caregiver has to be related to the child and the primary caregiver for the child, and they have to live with that caregiver. They can have a legal relationship with the child, such as legal custody or guardianship, or it can be an informal arrangement, such as power of attorney or an agreement between the birth parent and the relative caregiver. So it doesn't require any sort of formalized care. As long as they have an established relationship, they're related, they reside with them, and that caregiver is the primary caregiver. So how once the referral's made, we determine that they're eligible. then our family caregiver support program coordinator will reach out to that family, set up a time to do the necessary paperwork and meet with them to complete the intake. And so during that intake, they complete the assessment paperwork for the caregiver, also for the child. And then we also have additional required paperwork that's required that they review with them and complete with them. And then once they did, and then they speak with, obviously, with the caregiver and kind of determine what's this child's needs, where are they lacking, what does the caregiver need? And then once that's completed, then our coordinator contacts our tutoring provider and connects with them to get the paperwork to them, and then set up a time that the child can come in and be assessed. That's the key component, because the child has to come to the facility to get the assessment completed to determine where they are in school, what's their academic strengths and weaknesses, as well as their attitudes about school and learning, so that way they can tailor the program to meet their needs, their academic needs. And so once that's completed, then the tutoring provider contacts our coordinator, lets them know that the assessment was completed, and they'll make a recommendation as to what they feel is going to be most beneficial for that child. It does require that they attend a minimum of 2 hours per week. And depending on how many children there are, there is a care plan that has to be completed. And the amount that we can spend is that $7,000 per year. It can exceed that with authorization from our director, up to $8,500. But if there's only one child, that care plan, that total amount of $7,000 can be utilized for that. If there is more than one child, then that $7,000 has to be split between the 2 or 3 children. So of course the hours may lessen, but the care plan is eligible for a year, so they're able to utilize this. And we do it basically on an as needed basis, so there's not a requirement. Even though there's a minimum of 2 hours a week, they're not always able to attend. Obviously, when you're caring for children, things come up, or even with our older adults, so they're not always able to make it. And we're fortunate that our provider that we work with does not charge us if they do not participate or attend their session for the week. So once that's all completed, then the care plan is created, and then they're able to start their tutoring services. Something that we realize, because we are a 10-county region and we serve, we're in Chattanooga, and our provider is centrally located in Chattanooga, but we serve several outlying regions, areas. And we were very fortunate that the tutoring provider that we use is able to offer virtual online tutoring. And so as long as our families have the capability of getting internet services, sometimes they don't, we do try to provide them resources with low cost internet and help them get that set up. But we are able to provide the Chromebook, so the child has the equipment necessary to connect. And we are able to offer those tutoring services virtually, which is a wonderful thing, because we all know transportation can be a barrier for a lot of these families. I know you were saying earlier, Anna, that a lot of them are lower income, and so they don't have the ability to travel back and forth, especially with the cost of gas the way it is. A lot of them don't have reliable vehicles. So once that's all done, then they're able to start their tutoring services, and then they are assessed annually. They're able to utilize these services for a year, or until the funding, they exceed or meet the amount of their care plan. And they're reassessed annually, and they can continue to do this. Just doesn't stop. We've had one family, I was just talking about this yesterday. We had a family that started fairly early when we initiated this program, and here we are 2 years later. She's raising her 2 great nieces, and they are still attending, and she was having so many problems with these girls And in school, they were not doing well. She was having problems at home. And with them starting the tutoring, here we are 2 years later. The girls are doing excellent in school. She's not having any of the behavioral problems or anything like that. So she continues to go. Other people may opt to end the service. They may think the child is where they need to be. And I know we keep talking about this as tutoring for the child, but ultimately this is respite for that caregiver. They're not having to, and if you go ahead and do next slide, I'm sorry. So the benefits of it allows the caregiver to take time for themselves. It alleviates stresses associated with educational challenges as they parent a second time around, and it improves their relationship with the child. During the time the child is attending tutoring, the caregiver can use that time to do things for themselves. And even if the child's doing it virtually, they can, have time at home if they need to cook dinner, clean, do laundry. They have that time to do that. And then, we always talk about the respite continues beyond just the time the child is being tutored, because they're not having to deal with the homework. They're not having to deal with making them study for their tests. They're not having, the child gets the tools needed to complete their schoolwork more independently. It avoids arguments. It avoids frustration for that caregiver not understanding the subjects or schoolwork that they're trying to help the child with. And then, it does help the child to be more successful in school. So next slide, please. Okay, so what are our caregivers saying? Many report feeling less stress and relief knowing that the child is getting help with their schoolwork from professionals who understand the subject matter. They also feel relief from after seeing their child improving in school. Unfortunately, when a child is struggling in school, they tend to act out. With this educational support, caregivers have reported seeing improvements in the child's self-confidence and improvements in their behavior. Several report enjoying the time they have for themselves. One uses the time the child is attending tutoring to get a nap. Another reads a book. Some run errands and others make appointments. Several have reported that helping with homework was a constant struggle for them and all too often ended in long nights and lots of arguments. Being alleviated from that responsibility has allowed them to spend more quality time with the children. Next slide, please. We started the program in September of 2020. And since then, we've been able to serve 41 relative caregivers, 36 of which were female, 5 male, 17 Black African American, 24 non-minority, white, non-Hispanic, 33 were grandparents, 5 were great-grandparents, 2 were great aunts, and 1 was a great-great aunt. 9 were between the ages of 55 and 60, 11 between the ages of 61 and 65, 8 between the ages of 66 and 70, 5 between the ages of 71 and 75, and 8 between the ages of 76 and 80. So you can imagine what a tremendous help this has been for those folks.
Thank you, Teresa. I noticed we have a couple of minutes and we've gotten some great questions. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of them, which is you're using Title 3E funding for all of this, right? Which is Older Americans Act, National Family Caregiver Support Program money.
Yes, that's correct.
And then did that program, the National Family Caregiver Support Program, pay for the Chromebooks, or did you use CARE Act for that?
No, it's 3E.
Okay.
All of it, CARES Act was paying for it, and 3E is able to pay for it now. So
thank you. Thank you. I think we can turn now to Arcelia and Marcia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arcelia Armstrong, and I'm the coordinator for the Caregiver Support Program and Kinship Navigator programs at the Area Office on Aging. And this afternoon, my colleague, Marcia Rose, Kinship Navigator Program Supervisor, and I will share how capitalizing on partnerships help to extend the reach of our Kinship Navigator program. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. When thinking about partnerships, important things to consider are be strategic with the types of organizations you choose to partner with, build relationships with kinship families, community members, public, private, and nonprofit organizations, be solution-oriented as it relates to supporting kinship families, be innovative on ways to think of supporting kinship families, and invest in our future. Kinship caregivers are helping to raise our next generation. Teamwork. How can your organization work within and outside the system to support kinship families? All the aforementioned things are important to be mindful of as we support kinship caregivers. Next slide, please. And today, participants will increase their knowledge about the services offered through our Area Office on Aging Kinship Navigator program and increase their knowledge on how community partnerships can extend the reach and increase capacity. Next slide, please. And then just a little bit of background on our Kinship Navigator program. This originated through a partnership back in 2000 in response to Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. They sought to seek a way to help support kinship families, and through a local collaboration between agency directors at the Area Office on Aging, Lucas County Children's Services, and Lucas County Department of Job and Family Services, the Kinship Navigator program began here in Lucas County. And we have been providing services to over 1,000 grandparents and relative caregivers in Lucas County for over 22 years. You'll see the funding sources that support the program: Lucas County Children's Services Levy, Lucas County Department of Job and Family Services, National Family Caregiver Support Program, and also a Lucas County Senior Services Levy. Next slide, please. Our program team, we have a lot of years of combined clinical experience helping to provide support in social services, and we are all licensed social workers. Next slide, please. The enrollment in the Kinship Navigator, the enrollment in the Kinship Navigator program, it's free to our caregivers. Caregiver, as long as they're the primary caregiver raising the child birth to 18 years of age, they live in Lucas County. Other noteworthy things are with the Kinship program, there are no caregiver age requirements for our program, and that's in part due to the prior funding sources that I mentioned on the prior slide. And then there's no household or caregiver income requirements, and no legal custody requirements as well. Next slide. This is just a quick flyer on our Kinship Navigator program and some of the quick facts. We provide information and referral. That's what we're contracted to provide. And then this just kind of lists some of the supports that we provide our kinship families. Next slide, please. Information referral services that we're contracted to provide. We kind of have that in different buckets. We provide support for food, mental health, childcare and education, legal assistance, financial assistance, transportation, housing, furniture, and clothing. And you'll notice in the left-hand corner, we've got kind of a symbol there for contracting. Okay, next slide, please. And then the Area Office on Aging, we have a variety of programs and services through our office. You'll notice some of the publications that we produce are our Caregiving Smarts resource guide, and that's actually available to view online at areaofficeonaging.com. We also have our older adult resource guide, and then you'll see on the left of the slide, it kind of lists a variety of the programs and services that are available through our office. So all of our kinship caregivers have seamless access when they enroll in the program to link up with these additional services and supports. Next slide, please. And then the types of partnerships that extend our reach, again, include in-kind, you'll notice that icon, monetary, and then contractual. For in-kind, donation of space, distribution of our Parenting Smarts resource guide, donation of time and expertise, services, donation of items. You'll kind of see some of the things that are listed below each of those bullets. And then monetary, we have purchase of Toledo Farmers Markets coupons and holiday hams and turkeys for kinship families. And then we also received a Walmart Foundation grant for $70,000, mitigating malnutrition and farm fresh delivery. And then contractual relationships, again, are partners with Lucas County Department of Job and Family Services and Children's Services. And then you can kind of see the program requirements that are listed below: information referral assistance, education enrichment, community outreach. And then we also do a biannual customer satisfaction survey. And then we Also maintain quality quarterly performance measures as well. And then you'll notice below there's a link, some information regarding the program's purchase services that we provide. Next slide, please. The value of partnerships is huge. It benefits our caregivers by providing access, support, education, goods and services, linkage to reliable and committed local providers, which is important. It builds capacity and extends our program reach without burden on the program budget. It strengthens investment in the community, promotes collaboration across multiple systems, maximizes creativity and diversity of thought to address local community needs, and plants the seed and leads to future partnerships. Saying yes to partnerships is key. Next slide, please. Which one are you? Half glass full, half glass empty. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. What do you see? Opportunities or challenges? Now I'm going to pass the baton over to Marcia. I think you're on
Marcia,
mute,
you're
Marcia.
muted.
I just realized that. Thank you. So thanks, Arcelia. I'm going to dive right into an overview of our Kinship Navigator program services and identify how these services are made possible through partnership. I want to point out that currently our kinship programming is offered virtually through no contact distributions and using Zoom. I'm going to move through this overview rather quickly to stay within the time limits of today's webinar. On this slide, you'll see that our program does offer kinship clubs and support groups 3 times a year. These groups provide caregivers with an opportunity to connect with others in a similar situation, cope with the added stress of parenting again later in life, and increases their knowledge and skills. These groups are made possible through a contractual partnership with our funders and through in-kind partnerships with our featured guest presenters who are experts in their respective fields. On this slide in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the icons that were related to what Arcelia previously referenced. These are for in-kind and contractual partners. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The Kinship Navigator program offers an evidence-based wellness initiative for senior education workshop series twice a year. Our caregivers age 55 and older can learn about the aging process, how to make healthy lifestyle choices, and how to use simple tools to help feel empowered about their health. This workshop series is facilitated through an in-kind partnership with Harbor Behavioral Health. Harbor also provides first-time participants who complete the series with a free $50 Kroger gift card, which is a big help to our families. Next slide, please. The Kinship Navigator program, since 2021, has tried to make an effort to offer additional virtual programs to our kinship families. Examples of some of the educational programming has included topics on the in the areas of technology training, mental health, compassion fatigue, trauma, and parenting. These educational programs are made possible through a contractual partnership with our funders and through in-kind partnerships with our featured guest presenters. Next slide, please. Each year in the month of July, the Kinship Navigator program offers 6 days of virtual educational opportunities for caregivers and 3 days of virtual educational opportunities for children and youth. Topics span categories of education, mental health, permanency and support, legal issues, health and wellness, and caregiver self-care. On the right side of your screen is our virtual summer series agenda from 2022, which lists specific presentation titles and featured guest presenters. Again, these educational programs are possible through a contractual partnership with our funders and through in-kind partnerships with our guest presenters. Next slide, please. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Kinship Navigator program implemented an electronic tablet initiative to help decrease social isolation, strengthen social connections, and allow caregivers to access virtual programming. Participating caregivers received a tablet Wi-Fi connectivity, and access to individual and group technology support. The electronic tablet initiative was made possible through a contractual partnership and through the utilization of CARES Act funds. Next slide, please. Today, we wanted to share 2 photos and testimonials from kinship caregivers who participated in the electronic tablet initiative. On your screen, you'll see a beautiful picture of Tina and her 3 teenage grandsons she's raising. Tina told us that she utilized her tablet to learn Spanish. Next slide, please. On your screen, you'll see a picture of Rosalind and her 1 of 5 grandchildren she is raising. Rosalind told us she utilized her tablet for virtual doctor's appointments and to connect with others on social media. Next slide, please. The Kinship program publishes a quarterly newsletter 4 times a year. On your screen, you see an example of our quarterly newsletter and content. We also publish a bi-monthly e-blast, which features kinship programs that are upcoming and helpful community resources. Individuals can self-subscribe to our newsletter and e-blast through the Area Office on Aging website, which is www.areaofficeonaging.com. These publications are made possible through a contractual partnership with our funders. Next slide, please. Every other year, a Kinship Navigator program puts out a 64-page publication called the Parenting Smarts Resource Guide. This publication is popular with caregivers and community professionals and is a treasure trove of community resources for families. Content includes a variety of topics, as you see here on your screen. A copy can be requested by phone or viewed on our Area Office on Aging website. This publication is made possible through our contractual partnerships with our funders. Next slide, please. Through generous community partnerships, our Kinship Navigator program is able to offer various special events throughout the year. These special events assist kinship families with tangible items they would not otherwise have access to and are really popular with our caregivers. Past special events have included game tickets for family fun night, baseball camp scholarships, school supplies, winter coats for kids, holiday meals, and COVID relief gift cards. Our special events are made possible through in-kind partnerships with local organizations. Next slide, please. Today, we wanted to share a few photos of our kinship families enjoying those fun family nights at a Toledo Mud Hens game, and some of our kinship children participating in baseball camp this past summer. Again, our special events are possible through in-kind partnerships with local community organizations. Next slide, please. We also wanted to share a photo of 3 individuals from a community partner agency, Palmer Energy. Palmer Energy donated school supplies, and Buckeye Health Plan donated backpack totes, so our Kinship Navigator program could provide school supplies to kinship families this past fall. Again, our special events are possible through generous donations from our in-kind partners and local organizations. Next slide, please. Access to vital assistance through the Lucas County Children's Services Stabilization Program is now possible because of our long-standing contractual partnership with our funder, Children's Services. The Kinship Navigator program now performs eligibility pre-screening and interviews for the stabilization program. We do also assist those caregivers who have a closed case with Children's Services and have legal custody of a kinship child apply for assistance that they need to stabilize the household and promote permanency. Next slide, please. Vital assistance that kinship families have received through the stabilization program include things like cleaning supplies, hygiene items, childcare, rent assistance, utility assistance. The most requested consistently are food, clothing, and furniture. Next slide, please. During the COVID-19 pandemic, our community partnerships provided kinship families with much needed assistance. On your screen, you'll see several examples, including that we distributed $10,000 in Kroger gift cards to our caregivers to use to purchase groceries and cleaning products, which was made possible through our contractual partnership with the Toledo-Lucas County Health Department. Next slide, please. It is often said it takes a village to raise a child. This is particularly true in the world of kinship families. On your screen, you see a circle of logos which represent community partners that have been a part of the Kinship Village right here in Northwest Ohio. Through these partners, we've been able to extend the reach of our program to better assist kinship families. These organizations represent a diverse combination of partnerships, including in-kind, monetary, and contractual, which were developed over time by building relationships, having dialogue about how to meet the needs of our kinship families here at a local level, and by saying yes to the opportunities of partnerships. Next slide, please. I want to give you a few examples on your screen here of what our community partners are saying about the Kinship Navigator program. These testimonials are from some community leaders and key partner organizations, such as Lucas County Children's Services, our juvenile court system, Toledo Public Schools, ProMedica, and United Healthcare. Next slide, please. Sometimes it really does take a village to raise a child. By saying yes to the opportunity of partnerships as a team, together we can achieve more. Next slide, please. On your screen is the contact information for Arcelia Armstrong and myself. We invite you to reach out with any questions about the Kinship Navigator program or the community partnerships that we've built at the Area Office on Aging over the past 22 years. Next slide, please. I want to thank you for your time and attention for this part of our presentation.
Thank you both so much for sharing all the wonderful things you're doing. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Pam Plimpton from San Diego. Pam?
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to be with all of you today. Again, my name is Pam Plimpton, and I work with Aging and Independent Services, AIS. We're part of the County of San Diego's Health and Human Services Agency, and we are the AAA for San Diego County. And in my role as intergenerational coordinator, I work on projects and programs that bring older and younger people together. And as part of this, I have the great honor of working on our county's efforts to support kinship families. Next slide, please. As you know, and we've been talking about, these families have a very tall mountain to climb. It's typically not an easy transition. They face many challenges, just a few of which are reflected on this slide. And our county, like all of you, has made it a priority to help these families in that climb. We do this through a number of services and supports. This includes tapping into Older Americans Act funding, as has been referenced, in order to provide respite services and educational support and other services to kinship families. We've also partnered with fellow county departments, such as Child Welfare Services and the Office of Equitable Communities, along with multiple community organizations like the YMCA Kinship Support Program, to provide resources such as a dedicated web page on our 211 San Diego website. It's just for kinship families. And I'm going to ask Ali to pop that link in the chat, along with some other links I'm going to mention for you to look at, as well as the creation and distribution of a handbook for grandparents raising grandchildren and other relative caregivers. It's chock full of information about legal services, medical help, financial, housing, mental health resources, and more. And more recently, a really neat cookbook that was created with kinship families for kinship families, featuring lots of healthy recipes and self-care tips. So thanks, Ali, for putting those links in the chat, and I invite you to take a look at those. But we've also noticed something very striking when we have asked grandfamilies in the past for their feedback about what services they need. And a common refrain we have heard, next slide, please, is we just want to have fun with our grandkids. You know, so much about what they have been dealing with, as we've been talking about today, is stressful and daunting, and they just want to be able to enjoy themselves with the children in their care, strengthen family bonds, but that can obviously be very, very challenging on a limited income. So during this presentation, I'm going to focus the rest of my remarks on a novel idea we've implemented in our county to help grandparents and other kinship families have fun together, that came about in a really unique way. So if you look at this particular slide, I think it kind of sums up how we got to this point. Picture our AAA on the left, our larger Health and Human Services Agency, working to help kinship families. And lo and behold, we connected with a fellow county department through some of the other intergenerational work we do, County Parks and Recreation on the right, who fall under a completely different division of our county government. They're in land use and environment. And they not only have a lot of experience hosting families in nature, but they had made it a strategic priority to serve more foster youth. Who knew? So in meeting with them, they are actually the ones who suggested, you know, we ought to host a camp out focused on kinship families. And we decided to call it, next slide, please, Gramping. What a great idea. Next slide, please. So our inaugural event occurred in 2017. This is the, actually, if you could back up one slide. Oh, I don't see the slide. Okay, hold it right there if you would. We had a promotional flyer for that event, and it was so successful, we decided to make it an annual collaboration. We held two more, one in 2018, one in 2019, before unfortunately COVID hit, and we all know well about that. But I'm very pleased to announce that we are going to be resuming our Gramping events this spring, if COVID hopefully cooperates. And with Gramping, we're able to provide a complete camping experience for kinship families together with other fellow kinship families. And it's a chance not only to strengthen family bonds, but see that they're not alone in their situation, and hopefully encourage them to build an informal network of peer support with each other. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see a typical agenda for the event. The activities vary a little bit from year to year, but this is a sample rundown. It's a 2-day, 1-night event, and typical activities include lawn games and crafts, a guided nature hike, a glow stick dance off, which is just as fun as it sounds, s'mores around the campfire. You get the idea. It's a complete camping experience. And at the first event, we also did something we're hoping to do in March, which is an intergenerational tree planting activity. Dinner on Saturday night, breakfast on Sunday morning are provided along with snacks throughout. Next slide, please. So what is the key to making this happen? Well, as Marcia was just talking about, it's all about partnerships. It really does take a village. We have our parks department, which has the great sites. They waive the park fees for these campouts, and they just have multiple staff who are expert and passionate about helping people have fun in the outdoors, even helping the families set up their tents if need be. Then, of course, we have our Health and Human Services Agency, including our AAA and fellow departments that I referenced earlier, who have expertise in working with these families and the contacts to promote the events. For this event, we also provided funding for the food through general purpose revenue that we have from the county. Important other partners include sponsors like Outdoor Outfitters. We had one at our first event, as I recall, who donated tents and sleeping bags for those who didn't have them, and the families were able to keep those, so they'll hopefully enjoy them later. We also partnered with interns. You see some pictured here in this slide from a local university studying recreation management, who provided labor and really great enthusiasm. In this picture too, you see the ranger giving a presentation about creatures in the wild. You see the little snake in the bottom corner, good to watch out for. And these students, one of them gave a presentation during the event about being good stewards of the environment and leaving no trace behind. So they were awesome and great role models for the kids, hopefully helping some of the kids think about some career opportunities they'd never thought of. Next slide, please. So we've received overwhelmingly positive feedback about these events in our evaluations. One attendee noted that it was wonderful to spend quality time together without electronics. Next slide, please. Some of these families have never had the opportunity to go camping before, and the hope is that they'll continue to enjoy the outdoors together as a family afterwards. Disabled grandmother also said that there was no way she could have done an activity like this with her grandchildren without this help. And what is neat is that we're finding a number of kinship families are now asking for outdoor activities and requesting they be offered. Next slide, please. So seeing at least a little bit is believing. So what I'd like to do now, if it works, hopefully, is show you a short video that was filmed at our inaugural Gramping event. If you could cue that up, please.
This is our first ever kinship family camp out, what we've dubbed Gramping. And it's a chance for kinship families to get together, have fun, meet each other. Kinship families have a tough load. They are families who are raising relative children. It could be grandparents raising their grandchildren, aunts and uncles raising nieces and nephews. We want to give them a chance to have fun with each other.
Welcome to our first Gramping experience. Woo! County Parks was able to waive the fees for the youth area in a couple different campsites, as well as we have the camping gear. So if you've never gone camping or don't have the budget to go camping right now, we are going to be able to provide everything for you.
If I could jump up and kick my feet, I would, but I can't. But let's put this on top. Mother.
I was given an opportunity to watch over my grandson at 5.5 months old without realizing that I would have to inherit him. We've learned and we're still learning together. And these grandparent meetings help us to do that.
One of the things we hear is that sometimes these families may feel kind of alone in what they're experiencing, and they're not. We estimate there may be as many as 24,000 or more grandparents in San Diego County that are raising their grandchildren. So we want them to know that there are resources there and that there are other families that are going through this so they can support each other, both formally and informally, and just really give them a fun chance to strengthen those family bonds.
It's a wonderful opportunity because being by myself with him for quite a few years, I had no idea that these programs were available to grandparents like me. I, one time, was just kind of like flabbergasted with everything that was like, oh, I have to do this. Oh, I need help here, but where do I get it from? You know, because I'm starting all over again. It'll help not only you as a person, but your grandchildren or the children that you're caring for. So do it.
Always love watching that video. I hope it gives you a little bit of a glimpse of how special this event really is. I know for me personally, it's been a highlight of my professional career to be part of these events and help families tap into the research proven benefits of being in the outdoors, which I think we've all gained a greater appreciation for during the pandemic. So on a related note, if you could go to the next slide, please. Our county parks friends, again, had the idea of, since there's so much stress faced by family caregivers, kinship caregivers, why don't we host an event where we pamper these caregivers? So Grandpering was born. And during this event, the caregivers engage in self-care activities like yoga and art therapy, while the children and youth are engaged in kid-friendly games. Next slide, please. At our first event of Grandpering, the families then took a walk along a lake that's in the park and ate dinner together. And we've also hosted much smaller scale, simpler nature walks at a regional park for kinship families. Next slide. So I briefly do want to mention a couple key issues that need to be considered when you're putting on events like this. First, safety first, right? Oh, sorry, back one. We need to make sure we're keeping in mind any potential hazards in the outdoors, especially for an older adult population. I remember I was checking on rocks and holes and access to the bathrooms for the older adults. We had solar lights, so if they needed to use the restroom at night, it was as safe as possible. And secondly, we obviously need to be very trauma informed and remember that these families, especially the children, have been through a lot. Might they be more apt to be afraid at night or in sleeping in a tent? So we made sure everyone knew where the park staff tent was. They were there 24/7. If families needed to leave early, they could. Next slide, please. Just hurrying so we can get to questions. In closing, I encourage you to think about a few questions. What other older adults and at-risk families can benefit from engaging in nature? I would say all of them. We really feel like this model of working together with partners to address trauma and stress through the power of nature is very replicable and can be adapted to other types of family caregivers and their loved ones, including persons with cognitive impairments and persons with limited mobility. Next slide. Two final questions for you to ponder. In the work you do, how can you infuse nature-based solutions and who could be your possible partners? And next slide, please. Wishing you all well, as my friends in Parks and Recreation like to say, and tapping into the upside of outside. And last slide. If you have any questions at all, this is my contact information. I saw somebody say in the chat, no, gramping is not trademarked. Feel free to use that term, and I'm happy to share any information with you. And I'll turn it back to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. Yeah, I was going to ask you that question, but you've already taken care of it. So fabulous programs, and we just thank you all so much for sharing all these ideas. And want to remind you all that the report and fact sheet that Leland elevated at the beginning have many of these programs in them and additional information and ideas for replicating in your area, at your area agency on aging, and also ideas of how you can partner with area agencies on aging and Title VI programs in your community if you're not one of those programs. Please chat any questions you have at this point, and I will ask the presenters. We have one that just popped in right as I was speaking, so that's helpful. Are the Title III funds used to fund the gramping and the, I've forgotten the name of it, the awesome thing about the spa, Pam?
We do use Title III funds for some of our work, including our respite program, educational outreach. For gramping and grampering, pretty sure we exclusively used either general purpose revenue that we get through the county, but also utilizing, as was talked about earlier, those community sponsors, people like the Outdoor Outfitter. And then, of course, because we partnered with a fellow county department, Parks and Recreation, they were able to leverage their funds and what they have to join forces with us, waive those county fees. So it was definitely a group effort. But yeah, in that particular instance, we did not use Title III.
Thank you. And going back to Marcia, we had a question during your presentation about how well are your educational sessions attended?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, our educational programs and also our support groups, they're pretty regularly attended. We had to shift during the COVID-19 pandemic from a in-person model to using a virtual platform, and that was a big shift for our caregivers. And some of them didn't have a comfort level with jumping on to a virtual training. So it was a process in that, but our attendance is pretty good. What we did to boost attendance in the last year was offer a resiliency raffle. Again, through one of our partnerships with Buckeye Health Plan, we featured like a quarterly raffle, and caregivers could earn a ticket for whenever they attended a program and completed a survey at the end. And then every quarter we'd have a drawing. So our attendance went up by 60% with the raffle this past year. So I would say, our attendance varied anywhere from maybe 15 to 20 people per session. So.
As a
We had-
related question, what have been some of your techniques for reaching the families? Just bringing them in initially.
As
Finding
far as, finding them. Well, we do outreach, and go to a lot of our different partner organizations, children's services, the juvenile court system. We've outreached to the Board of Developmental Disabilities, our community mental health organizations, our libraries, our YMCA's, preschools, childcare centers. So the list is almost endless. But I think one of our most key outreaches was this past fall. I outreached with Children's Services, and they're now sending us all of their cases when they get a kinship family. They're not just waiting till they're closed out or the family has custody. They're like, no, these families need support. And that linkage, with our program prior to that happening to them, where they don't have anyone. So we're seeing a big influx of referrals now from Children's Services.
Thank you, Marcia. Teresa, how about you? What are some of the ways that you're finding families?
We're very fortunate that we have the relative caregiver program housed under our agency. So we do get a lot of people that way, but we also have been reaching out, like I said, to the school systems, social workers in the schools, school counselors. We've even let our provider know that provides the tutoring services. If they have families that come that have, meet the age requirements, to contact us, and we can get them set up through us so they don't have to pay for that tutoring service, because it can be costly. So.
Yeah, sure. And all the presenters, feel free to put your cameras on at this point so that people can be reminded of your fabulous presentations, and if they have any questions for you. Does anybody, I believe I've asked everything that's outstanding, but here's another one. Does this program help find families who deal with legal status conflicts? And I think that popped up while you were talking, Teresa, so it might be to you, but we can ask it of all the presenters. Do you help find families? And I suspect the answer is no.
We don't through our respite tutoring. We do with our relative caregiver, whether it be connecting them with legal aid, giving them suggestions if they're wanting to file for adoption, to see if they can find an attorney pro bono, reduce the cost, whatever, those types of things.
And do all of you partner with some kind of legal aid provider or association?
We actually at our area agency also have had some attorneys come in to our kinship club meetings, support group meetings, and provide free advice pro bono there for caregivers. And then we also provide information in our Parenting Smarts resource guide. And then through the community outreach efforts as well, we work a lot with, like Marcia mentioned, the court system as well too. So we get direct referrals that way as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, the legal community is such an important stakeholder in all of this. For that reason that we elevated at the beginning, right? I mean, they lack that automatic legal relationship. So that challenge can pose a challenge. Got an interesting question in here. If the panelists could kind of, maybe we can start with you, Acela, and I'm saying it wrong again. Arcelia?
Arcelia, you got it.
If you could kind of compare and contrast the experiences of those grandparents or other relatives who are married versus those who are divorced or widowed, like how do you find their needs vary or their strengths?
Yeah, and it really just depends. Each individual caregiving situation is different. We've got quite a variety of caregivers, some that are married. We've got some that are widowed and divorced. So it just kind of depends on what their unique situation is. But we cover the full gamut of legally separated grandparents to divorced grandparents, widowed. So we cover the range. And oftentimes their needs are really quite the same. A lot of times they're needing access to financial support. Sometimes they're caregivers that maybe have recently retired and received custody of the children. So that financial stressor kind of comes in, and we do a lot of connecting to services in our community to help support them financially too.
Thank you. And Leland, I believe that financial stressor came up through the poll, didn't it? That was kind of a big need area.
Yeah, I think it was second on the list of the top stressors. The first being, I think, was still outreach, but the second was financial resources.
Thank you. Oh, and Marcia, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to kind of jump back because I saw a question pop up during our presentation
Yeah.
about our marketing materials. And if we have somebody, because they thought they were very good and they wondered if we had someone professionally do them. And although the answer is no, that's something that our tiny kinship department, we do ourselves, and we use a free program called Canva. Some of you might be familiar with that, to create, flyers, brochures, different things for our support groups and educational programs. So that's just a tip I wanted to put out there. We do it ourselves.
Thank you, Marcia. And Pam?
I was just going to add, because it sort of plays into the outreach idea, but it's also just important. And I know some of you all out there are probably doing this, but it's great to try to involve some kinship caregivers themselves in your planning efforts. I remember thinking, how would they possibly have time for that when they're raising these kiddos? But we do have grandparents that like to stand up, and we have a quarterly work group that meets that's comprised of county and community partners, and several kinship caregivers are part of that. And they give great feedback and input, and then they can help get the word out through their networks and fellow kinship caregivers about what's going on. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, such a good point. Word of mouth is so critical. In Rhode Island, I'm reading, the biggest struggle that they face is with affordable housing. Do you all have any affordable housing partnerships that you'd like to elevate?
That is a huge issue. We're all shaking our heads. It's a tough
Well,
one.
I do know that one of the area agencies on aging that we talked to when we were looking for agencies profile was one in New York City, which does partner with a grandparent family apartments, which does provide affordable housing to them. I can't remember the details of that, but certainly if anyone wants to reach out to me, I can connect you with that information.
Thank you, Leland. And I'll ask the team to drop in the chat if you all would, the State of Grandfamilies report that we did on affordable housing, because there are some models around the country of affordable housing with services on site specifically for grandfamilies, including one here in DC called Plaza West. So I'll have them drop that resource in the chat. Now, I know you all are kind of a mix of urban and rural. Have you seen, what would you see are some of the differences between serving grandfamilies in those two broad areas?
I know for us in the rural areas, resources are very limited. So if you get into the, Chattanooga inner city area, there's so many more agencies that are able to assist, but you get into those outlying areas and it's very limited.
Mm-hmm. And the pandemic somewhat helped this situation, didn't they? Because of the ability to provide some services virtually, like support groups. I don't know. That's what I've heard.
And I was going to mention, for us in the northwest corner of Ohio, the Toledo area, we're really blessed in that we have a lot of really well-developed partnerships that we've been able to tap into throughout our 20+ years. So we're kind of lucky here that we've got such a close relationship with the judges in town, the Children's Services Board, the Mental Health Board, DD. So we've got a really good network of providers in our area.
Yeah, it's easier when it's a good tight community and well populated.
Sorry, I also know that in the research that I did when I was working on the report and fact sheet is that in rural areas, there's also a huge issue with transportation. A lot of the kinship and grand families, even if, you know, there's the grocery store might be miles away, and if they don't have transportation, that really limits their ability to access services. Luckily, and we will be having a fact sheet coming out later this year on how the Aging Network can help with self-care tasks, or not tasks, but self-care of older adults. And one of the things we do mention is the number of area agencies on aging, as well as Title VI Native American aging programs that offer transportation assistance.
Well, and I would just second what you're all saying, because we have a huge county with, you know, some really remote areas and of course, urban areas. And it's that transportation, you know, when we host events, it may be miles and miles for people to go. And we try to think strategically about things being on public transportation routes and the like, but it's still an issue. Virtual has helped, as you said, Anna, but there's still that gap, as I think somebody mentioned in the chat, about having internet connection, having devices, and having the training. So I think it's great, these programs that are trying to get Chromebooks and the like in people's hands, but they need that tech support training as well.
Good point, Pam. And there is an organization that we've worked with in the past that helps kind of train seniors on using technology, and we'll dig that up and share that when we share the slides and the recording too. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today and for answering these questions and your fabulous presentations. And we look forward to staying connected with all of you at the network. And on that note, I ask that if you're not signed up for our newsletter, which will be coming out shortly, that you sign up, and the team will drop that in the chat. And I'm just going to end with sharing a few resources with you all that hopefully you'll find helpful. One of them being our brand new website. And on here, you will find within the next couple of days, the slides, the recording from today, and related resources that were dropped in the chat. But you'll also get an email alerting you to where it is on the website. But please poke around here and let us know what you think. And hopefully you'll find some resources that are helpful, including on the next slide. We have grand fact sheets for each state, and now Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands as well, and DC, I should mention. And some tribal fact sheets will be coming shortly through our partner, National Indian Child Welfare Association. But these are intended for caregivers, so you can share them with the families, and they should list the relevant programs and contact information in that jurisdiction. So if your program's not listed in one of them, let us know and we will remedy that. But feel free to download these and use them with your family and share them with your families. Next slide, please. We're proud that we recently released this resource. It can be used with professionals, it can be used for the families, and it really walks through SNAP or food stamps and how grand families and kinship families can access that resource. I think it's a really solid tool that was developed by one of our subject matter experts at the Food Research and Action Center. Next slide, please. We also have a list of Kinship Navigator programs around the country. So look here to see if there's a program in your area and how you can connect with them, as well as your local area agency on aging. And then finally, this is the QR code to register for our newsletter, but I know they're going to drop it in the chat as well if you don't have your phone handy. But we hope that you will join us. And we're just embarking on this Technical Assistance Center. We're just started our second year. So we have many more webinars to provide, and we hope you stay, and resources to develop. So we hope you stay connected with us. And I really appreciate you all joining us today, and especially Leland and all the wonderful area agencies on aging that we heard from today. So thank you all. And yeah, please stay connected. Thank you all. And there's the sign up link. I know they were waiting to shut down the webinar until they could share that, but we'll also share it through the email that goes out. So you'll have it if you're not quick enough, if you're not able to click on it right now. Thank you all again.